Hey guys, we're over the layout now. We have to remove this plate on these turnouts because we're using a Pico turnout, so it has an over center spring that we got to remove to make it easier for the servo to work. So we just take our little X-Acto blade and lift these tabs up that hold the bracket in place, bend them out of the way. There we go. On the back side of that is a little tiny spring right there. It's probably hard to see. It's darn near invisible. But you have to pop it out of this plate. Just take your blade and twist it out. That's good. And then clear out any debris that got in your way, because there's some ballast that got in there. So the plate goes back down properly, and then just drop your plate in. It fits into a little groove there, and then just gently push your tab back over. Take a pair of needle nose, and I usually give them a little squeeze. And there, now the turnout's prepared for the servo. So I'll go ahead and do the other one, and then we'll be ready to show mounting the servo under the layout. Be back in a few. Alright guys, so now we got our handy dandy foam board adhesive from Loctite. Let's take it and put a few smears on here. Make sure that's plenty to hold it in place. And then we line the wire back up here after we've trimmed it. This is the fun part, seeing the hole under the layout. And there we go. And that's it. Next step will be running all of our wiring. Well guys, we're back here under my layout here under one of our modules of the club. Got our two servos mounted, ready to go. I want to explain a little bit about how the servo wiring works. Just a quick little intro here for what we use for connectors. We use these little Molex connectors because me and my friend that started this we were in the electronics business, so these were common to us and they're very robust. So as you can see here, this is one of the harnesses. What I'm using is 3 conductor bulk wire for the servos. Got this from I think Servos and Things or something like that. And I also bought bulk connectors and bulk pins and a crimp tool. But I also have some leftovers of these little extensions here, so for now what I've been doing is trimming these and soldering them onto the wire. So I have a servo wire coming into the connector here from the adjacent module, and that's going to run through and up to here, because up here is on this face is where our control panel will mount. Here's the wire for this servo. I keep all of them on the little pigtail connectors so that if I never need to replace it, just pop it out, bolt a new one in place, and I'm ready to go. So that one's there. Let's see here. And then same here, I have to solder the extension on here to go up to the control panel area, so I'll be doing that soon. And I have another wire coming from this end over here. Now look at this, goes to the adjacent module. So this one's like the center of our station, so the control panel is here, and we have the 2 ends of the passing sidings are over here and over here, and these 2 are storage tracks in the middle. So everything kind of comes into the module here, out through the control panel. So in another video I'll show you what the control panel looks like. So I'm going to get started doing some wiring here, and when I'm done I'll give you some little tips on what I did and everything like that. But thought I'd like to at least show you guys how it all looks so far. So I'll be back in a minute. Alright guys, let's crimp some pins on our wire here. So to start with, I take the wire and split it with my trimmers, and then I take my tool here and I'm probably pulling 1/4 inch of insulation off the end, because this is smaller gauge wire than these connectors are really designed for. So I go ahead and double the wire up. I bought as heavy of a wire as I can, and it actually works pretty good. So then, as usual, just twist your wires up and everything, make sure that's good. And then I'll show you crimping one of the pins on and popping it into the connector. And it's fairly simple there. You can get these from like Mouser, all different kinds of places. They're the Molex 0.093 pin diameter series. So since I'm doing it in the connector on this end, I'm going to use the female pins. I'll get 3 of them out here. So just buy the pins in bulk. Alright. So like I said, I take the wire and I just pinch it over itself halfway. Pack it nice there so it's good. Then I grab me one of the pins. And I got the Molex crimpers for this. So there's 2 parts in the pin. The part in the front here is where the wire crimps. This is for your insulation crimp. So you start with the wire crimp, which is the back here. And I put that part in first. Just lightly tighten up the crimper, then I take the wire and insert it like so. Just give a squeeze. Okay, that part's done. Then I put it in the front jaw and work the insulation crimp here. This doesn't crimp as good, so I just usually take and turn it around a little bit and make sure it's got a good fit, and then when I'm done, give it one last good squeeze, and then make sure the pin's straight. Otherwise, if you don't make sure the pin's nice and flat after the crimping, what happens is they go ahead and they sit odd in the connector, and sometimes the pins don't line up right, and they become a real bugger if you have to pop them out, because we have a tool that we can use to push the pins out. So let me crimp a couple more here, and then we'll show how to put them in our connector. So we put that in the back of the tool. Wire in. Okay, that one's crimped. That's good. Usually when I crimp the insulation part, I like to hold to the front of the connector to keep it from moving around too much. By rotating it on the back end, you make sure you get 2 pieces of metal to overlap real good and give it a good, strong support on the wire. Here we go. That one looks good. And now we got one more to go. Do my wire here first. There we go. Just bend it back on itself. And then pin into the crimper. Sometimes they like to fight you going in there. Give it a squeeze. Okay. Pop it out. Like I said, we chose these connectors when we built this thing 20 years ago. We just stuck with them rather than cinch joints or anything like that, because it's something we were familiar with, and we had in certain areas we had a lot of pin concentration, so something like this made sense. Alright, so now we got 3 pins on our wire, and I have pins 4, 5, and 6. So we have the red is your servo plus, black servo minus, yellow is the control signal. So we just take our connector over here and feed the wire through. And then red goes to pin 4. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Just take it from the back, slide it in, give it a little push. And then yellow is pin 5. Put that one in next. And then lastly, pin 6 is the black wire. And usually I take my needle nose and just put them around the wire lightly. So I hit the metal of the pin, just give it a good push to seat in there, and you hear a little click, and it locks in. Alright, let's get the red one then. There we go. Okay, got our servo pins right there. So now, alright, so I'll continue on from here, get my wiring ready up for the control panel, get it all connected up, and then I'll show you when I'm done, and then we'll go into building the control panel. Alright, see you in a little bit. Hey guys, well, we're back on my bench here. I got started on the control panel for the modules I've been wiring. So, give you a quick view of it. I've already mounted the little fascia controller boards that I showed you in a previous segment here of how to wire up. So, there they are in the back, here and here. Now I have the control board, and I have the daughter board here, and the relay over here all foam taped down. The main board, I glued little 440 T-nuts down and use these little cap screws to secure it to the T-nuts. They're held in place with hot glue. So what I have to do now is do the wiring harnesses that will go to these connectors that plug into the layouts. I have a 15 pin here which will hold the 4 servo circuits, and then this 12 pin will bring in my DCC and my power feed for the board, and also the 4 wires I need for the relay for our signal light. So let's get started on this. Okay guys, I've got all my pins together, wire and such. So we're just going to use this standard bulk 3 conductor servo wire. So I want to roughly measure how much wire I need for each connection, and then we'll get into doing the pin crimps and everything. So I usually like to leave myself a little bit extra hanging down for the connector to have some slop under the layout. So we're going to go servo right to there approximately. Okay, so we'll cut 4 pieces about the same length. Doesn't have to be exact, it just looks neater if it is, that's all. I like the fact that the Tam Valley system actually works with standardized components, so you don't have to do anything real custom to it. All the wiring, you can buy all the bulk components and pins that you want. So these 4 pieces of wire will be for our servos. So one end I have to use these Molex pins for the Molex connector. And the other end I have the bulk pieces for the servo connectors and a bunch of pins. So I just got to grab the right either male or female. In these cases, these will be female pins going in there. So I'll grab another pack out of here. Yep, there we go. Perfect. So I'm going to set up here, get the piece I need out, and then I'll show how to crimp on one of the connectors and such, and then that way you have an idea of what you have to do to get this going. So we'll make up one of the wire connections, and then I'll go forward and wire up the rest of it and show you what it looks like when I'm done. And then we'll have to make jumper harnesses as well with just the servo wire that will go from each of the fascia controllers here to the 4 ports on the fascia board. So we'll be back shortly. So guys, we've got our pins and our housings and such and all of our wire together. So we'll start with the female pins here. They go straight into these plastic housings. They come in little carrier strips like this. Just clip them off with your flush cutters. It's fairly straightforward. Sometimes they're a little difficult to cut though. There we go. Let's cut it from the other end. Alright, there we got those pins. So now we'll just take one of our lengths of wire here. And I usually split the end a little bit because they're together. So just take my cutters. I can fan the wire apart just a little bit. Makes it easier to get like the crimper in. So take our handy dandy little cheap wire strippers here, and it might be hard for you to see, but there's 2 sections to the pin here. The tail section here crimps around the insulation. This little part in the middle here crimps over the wire itself. So you only need maybe 1/8 of an inch stripped off the wire. You can usually just gauge it by looking at the connector. So we'll pop this a little bit off. There we go. You just want to make sure that you have enough in there so that it gets a good crimp in the insulation part, but don't put too much, because what can happen then is it interferes with the pin mating in the connector. So here we go. So you can see that it just fits right in there perfectly, just like that. So now we'll get our crimper out, which this is pretty much the same thing as the big pins we use for these Molex connectors, but it's much smaller. So the pins are a little bit fun to work with. You want to really kind of fit the pin in very gently into your crimper. Okay. See, I have a position so the piece where the insulation sits in just sticks out. Okay, just like that, right? It's right there. And then you just take your wire and feed it in and give it a squeeze. And when you pop it out, it's nice and crimped right there, and then you just put it in the other jaw and you squeeze down the insulation crimp. Oh, that didn't squeeze too well. Sometimes they're a pain. So I fit it back in, give it another squeeze or 2. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work, just like the big pins. You want to make sure it's, there we go. It's nice and crimped now. So then we'll take our housing, and you have to make sure you line them up in the right order, because it's the signal, which is in this color sequence, is your yellow wire. Then there's red and black, so that's how it should go in that order in the connector to match the labeling on the board. And it's hard to tell. You see there's an open area on the connector there, and the back of it's sealed. The open area wants to go up into the little openings in your connector there, because there's a latch that pops down. If you ever got to pull one of these out, unlike the Molex, you don't need a special tool. You just go in there with an X-Acto blade, and you see, give it a little tug. Boom, she's in there ready to go. So we got to do 2 more, and then this end we'll put the Molex pins on, and it will be ready to go. So let me get the crimping, and when we're done, I'll show you plugging one of these cables in. Alright guys, well we got our little cable extension here all crimped. Just when you push the pins all the way in, there's that little tab I told you about. It's right there. Just take a little needle nose or something and make sure it pushes down in there so the pins don't pull out. Otherwise you'll plug it in and all the wires will back out on you. So for the other end, it's pretty much the same deal. You know, we'll split our wires here a little bit. I usually do about a 1/4 inch or so. Just enough so I can split them apart, give me a working room. The only difference on this end is that because we're going into the bigger Molex connector, we want to strip a little bit more of the wire. Because this is 26 gauge wire, I think, or 22. I forget for the servo. I got the heavier servo wire. But what you need to do is strip about twice as much as you're going to put in the pin, okay? And then double it back on itself. Gives it a little more wire to hold on to when you crimp that part of the connection. So it's a lot easier that way. Alright, we got our wire. Keeps wanting to rip the jacket when I peel it. So sometimes this stuff is a little tricky. There we go. Alright. So let me grab the wire strippers. We'll strip off a little bit of the yellow here to start with. Okay, so you can see I'm stripping, yeah, 3/8 of an inch maybe. And I twist it up good. I just take my fingernail about halfway through it, pinch it, and bend it back on itself. And then make sure it's all tucked in tight. Then just take the bigger version of the crimpers we just used for the one connection. And this one here, the wire insulation goes here, or the wire crimp goes here, the insulation crimp goes in the front. So you gotta slide the pin in through the jaws and just line up your wire crimp and just pinch down it a little bit. Then you take your wire, feed it in there till the insulation's by it, and then just give it a good squeeze. Okay. Now what I do is just take it out, grab the end of the pin, and you gotta work it up here in the insulation crimp area. This is really meant for heavier wire, so sometimes you gotta work it around a little bit to make sure it wraps around the cable better. Give you a good solid grip, because that's part of the strain relief really in the cable system. There we go, and then sometimes it bends the connector pin a little bit, so I just take it and hold it in the jaw and straighten it and make sure it's flat. That way the pins line up better that way. There we go. So that one is ready to go. So we got a couple more to do, then I'll show you putting them in the connector.